Hello everybody, my name is Pickaxe, and today I'm going to be doing a texture art tutorial for various kinds of stone bricks. Now, as you probably don't know, I am actually making a decoration mod, so I have a lot of experience with custom stone bricks. I've made a lot of these textures and I know how they work, so this is going to be a basic tutorial on how to use some simple steps to turn a single polished stone texture into various different kinds of bricks. So like I said, all you're going to need for this tutorial is a polished stone texture like I have over here. I have polished granite, which is the block we are going to be working with for this tutorial. And if you want to grab the base Minecraft textures, you can't just go into the files and do that. My suggestion is that you go to this website, mcasset.cloud, and there you can generate all the assets for any version of Minecraft that you want, all the way down to 1.3. That way you can nab the textures you want to do this tutorial. Without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. Photo editing software of choice, I tend to use Fire Alpaca because I like the tools it provides, but this should work with any texture editor. As long as it can work with small 16 by 16 textures, you should be fine. Now we're just going to drag this into here so that we can start editing it. Now the first and probably most important step of this process is going to be removing the shine and shading texture on this block, because if you remember from my Mod of the Week series, Decoration Disaster, a decoration mod, had custom stone bricks, but they didn't remove the barrier, so it looked a bit weird. So the way I like to do that is to select the base color of the block and then just like that. And then what you're going to want to do is then do some retexturing of the block. Now I'm going to speed this part up because it's different for everybody and it's not always going to be the same, so see you in a second. Alright, now that you've finished, it should look a little something like this. Now you're probably going to want to edit this a little bit because it won't always look exactly how you want it, but it should look basically like this. Now this is basically a smooth polished texture. If you want to use this in your mod, that is also pretty cool. I do use it in mine. Video on that hopefully coming soon. But in any case, now that you have this, we can start actually turning it into bricks. Now, we are of course going to start out with the main attraction of this video, the regular stone bricks. Now if we take a look at these, taking a look at the stone brick texture, you can see two very important points that give this thing its shape. You can see that the highlight that goes up and around here on both the bottom and top of the brick, and there is a line of shading along the bottom. What we're going to do is we're going to emulate that after of course copying over the dividing areas of the stone bricks. Now when drawing this, it's important that you use a really dark texture, but not necessarily black, because we're going to want this to be like an engraving, not a painted on sort of thing. You're going to want to go to the middle of the block, but it's 16 by 16, so of course the middle is too wide. For this, you're going to want to use the top middle portion, because the bottom has the bottom line on it. So once you've done that, make sure you use a separate layer for this, if I haven't said it already. But now that you have this, you're also going to want the line down, which is slightly more to the left, so if we go to the to center, you're going to want to use this one. Now, I've seen instances where people just stop at this and think, wow, I have the texture, but no, we can make this look even better. First thing we're going to want to do is add a little more detail to the actual brick lining. And you can do that by just adding some dark spots to where corners are, and blending that just a little bit better. You can also use filters like hue to sort of make it a little bit more to your liking. Change the brightness up. There we go. That looks a little bit better. But now it's time for the most important part that really gives these bricks that brick feeling. You're going to want to create two new layers, and then on this first layer, you're going to want to emulate the highlights using white. You could just make this a solid color because you can obviously change the opacity of the layer, but make sure that this pixel right here up in the corner, just like here, is not colored in. At least not colored in as much, because if it's just a straight corner, it will not look as good as you want it. So doing the same down for these bricks, looping it over just a smidgen, maybe a bit more than that. There you go, now you have the lighting. Now you're going to want to lower the opacity of this layer quite significantly, depending on how much you want it to be defined. But of course it still doesn't look great yet because you need the shading layer. As you can see, the layer on this texture goes straight along the bottom. No fancy gimmicks for that, just straight along the bottom of these. The occasional bump up or so. Once again, change the opacity down to really low, likely even lower than the highlights, and then as you can see, the texture is looking pretty good, and that is actually pretty much it for the regular brick texture. As you can see, it looks pretty nice as is, a really nice defined brick shape, and it's completely loopable because we made it in the same fashion as the default stone bricks. Perfect. You've made your regular bricks, but what about the other stuff? You could just stop here, but that wouldn't be that interesting. So, if you want to make some other textures, you're going to want to get rid of this and just leave the base texture, because of course you don't just want the bricks. Now, the next thing we're going to work on is the chiseled bricks. Looking at it here, there are a lot of things that seem like they would be pretty easy, but are not quite obvious how you would actually do them. I'm going to quickly just grab the color of the original bricks, and I'm going to start a new layer. Now what it looks like is that you just draw this all right in the middle, but it's a 2x2 middle, so obviously that isn't correct. It's 3x3, but now it's off center. So the way it actually works is I find it easiest to start with the outline along the side here. Drawing that on, it makes it a little bit easier to find out what we're doing. Now you can see it goes 2 pixels over and then the next ring. An easy way to do it easier is to use the rectangle tool. That was a little bit off. So there we go, that's the next layer, and then of course the 3x3 center. As you can see, that's looking a little bit better, but of course, similarly to how you can't just have the lines on the bricks, you're going to need to do a little bit extra. Creating 2 new layers, once again for the shading and the highlighting, we're going to use the shading first. The shading, as you can see, goes along this edge most times. So let's go ahead and do that. Of course, it's not always even, so you're going to want to erase it with an opacity eraser. But then, of course, you're going to want to... Oh wait, we still need to do the other ones. Then, of course, the highlight on the inside here. Then, as you can see, there's highlight slightly on this edge, too. So you're going to want to reverse it up a little bit and do that. Alright, now time for the shading. I'm going to switch over to black, and there's some shading along here in various places, and shading along here. And finally, you're probably going to want to add a little bit of shading along this line here. Now you're going to want to turn the opacity really low, as before, on both of these, so that it's only visible enough to slightly change the definition of the shape. As you can see, we are already looking really good. Now there are just a few tweaks that will greatly improve your design here. You're going to want to add a little bit, just a little bit of shading along here. So I like to use an opacity brush to do that. And then a little bit of highlighting, ever so slightly, along the bottom side here. There you go, the chisel looks pretty good. I recommend playing with the sliders a bit so that it looks as good as you could make it, because obviously you don't want like super hard shading or no shading at all. A little bit of shading. And there you go, a little edits to the actual borders, and you are looking pretty sweet. Now there's one more, slightly more optional texture I'm going to teach you how to do, and that is a more conventional brick texture. Not like the stone bricks, but rather like regular bricks. Now for this I'm going to use a template because it is easier to just nab this pattern than to do it manually. But you can go ahead and do it manually if you want, you know, there's no issue in doing that. But I'm just going to take this layer and just then pop it in there. Now already this brick texture is just about the hue that we're going to want it. You're of course going to want to saturate it and darken it to make it look a bit better. Right around there, I'd say. Yeah, look at that. So now, the important part is the shading. Looking at the actual bricks, you can see that the shading is often along just the first few pixels of the top, and the shading is like this L shape on both sides. So of course, that's the shading we are going to want to go for with this brick texture. Once again, create 2 new layers, and then we get the white. So of course, as before, just that shading along the top with the solid white, just so you know what you're doing. and the lighting is looking pretty nice. Turn the opacity down so we know exactly what it's going to look like in the future, and it's time to do the shading. So you're probably going to want to turn the opacity a little bit down on this one, but you're going to want to do the shading as it appeared in the default texture. A little bit of L shapes pretty much everywhere. Alright, and now we got that. Just a little bit of opacity drop, and as you can see, after a little bit of adjusting, we have a pretty sweet looking regular brick texture. Assuming you've done that, using only this one polished granite texture, you have now created chiseled, stone brick, and regular brick variants. But anyways, that just about does it for this tutorial. I'm going to use the software M Creator to input these textures into Minecraft so we can see them in action. And there you go. With some pretty easy, simple steps to follow, only like borders and shading, you have made 4 pretty sweet variants on normal blocks. If you enjoyed this texture tutorial and would like to see more, then please like this video and comment what sort of tutorial you would like me to do next. And without further ado, I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.